Girl sentenced to life imprisonment presents evidence. Judge panics and does something unexpected. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect or anticipation. This was the silence of discomfort, the kind that settles over a room when something feels deeply, terribly wrong. Emily Cross sat at the defense table, her small frame barely visible above the wooden edge. She was 6 years old. Her feet didn't reach the floor. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, gripping the fabric of a dress that was too big for her, borrowed from someone who thought it looked appropriate for court. Her eyes were red, swollen. She'd been crying for what felt like hours. The judge, a man named Harrison Feldman, sat high above everyone else, his face carved from years of watching people lie, confess, and beg. He'd seen it all, or so he thought, but today even he seemed unsure. "Emily Cross," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You have been accused of starting a fire that resulted in the death of Noah Cross, your adopted brother. Do you understand the severity of these charges?" Emily didn't answer. She stared down at her hands. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper tone, stood. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The fire originated in the defendant's bedroom. A lighter was found with her fingerprints. Witnesses have testified that she exhibited troubling behavior in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. This court must consider the safety of the community and—" "She's 6 years old," the defense attorney interrupted, his voice strained. He was a public defender named Martin Schaefer, and he looked exhausted. "She doesn't even understand what's happening here." "She understands enough," the prosecutor shot back. Judge Feldman raised a hand. "Enough, both of you." He turned his gaze back to Emily. "Young lady, is there anything you'd like to say before I make my decision?" For a long moment, Emily said, "Nothing." Then, slowly, her hand moved. She reached into the pocket of her dress. The bailiff took a step forward, instinctively alert. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. Even Martin Schaefer leaned in, confused. Emily pulled something out. It was small, burned. A piece of fabric, charred at the edges, with faint streaks of red still visible through the ash. She held it up with trembling fingers. I have proof," she whispered. The courtroom froze. Judge Feldman leaned forward. "What is that?" Emily's voice cracked. "It's from Noah's notebook, the one they said was gone." The prosecutor's face went pale. Martin Schaefer's mouth opened, but no words came out. And in the gallery, Emily's mother, who had been sitting stone still for the entire hearing, closed her eyes. The judge's gavel hovered in the air, but he didn't bring it down. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost afraid of the answer. Emily looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "He told me to keep it safe," she said. "He told me someone would try to make it disappear." 3 months earlier. The Cross family lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Ridgewood, a small town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were supposed to stay buried under polite smiles and Sunday church attendance. Their house sat on top of a gentle hill, painted pale yellow with white shutters. It looked like something out of a home magazine. Perfect lawn, perfect garden, perfect everything. But perfection, as most people know, is exhausting to maintain. Inside, Claire Cross stood at the kitchen counter, staring at a stack of adoption papers. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it by gripping her coffee mug tighter. Her husband, David, walked in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. He was a mechanic, good with engines, less good with emotions. "You okay?" he asked. Claire nodded, but didn't look at him. "Just thinking." "About Noah?" She exhaled slowly. "About all of it." They'd been trying for years to have another child after Emily. Fertility treatments, specialists, prayer groups, nothing worked. And then, 6 months ago, a social worker named Angela Pryor had called them about a boy. Noah Brennan, 8 years old. In and out of foster homes since he was 3. Behavioral issues, the file said. Trauma from early childhood, but Angela assured them he just needed stability, love, a real family. Claire had wanted to believe that. David set the rag down and walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. He's been here 2 weeks. It's an adjustment. For all of us. I know, Claire said quietly. But Emily's fine. She's not, David. She barely talks to him. She hides in her room. Yesterday, I found her crying in the bathroom and she wouldn't tell me why. David frowned. Kids take time to adjust. You read the books. This is normal. Claire finally looked at him. Is it? Before he could answer, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Noah appeared in the doorway. He was small for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes, and a face that seemed older than it should be. He didn't smile much. When he did, it never quite reached his eyes. Morning, David said, forcing a brightness into his voice. You? Hungry? I can make pancakes. Noah shook his head. Where's Emily? Claire and David exchanged a glance. She's still asleep, buddy, Claire said gently. Why don't you go watch some TV? We'll call you when breakfast is ready. Noah didn't move. He just stood there, staring at them with an high expression that was hard to read. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. David let out a breath. See? He's fine. But Claire wasn't so sure. Later that afternoon, Angela Pryor stopped by for a routine check-in. She sat in the living room with a clipboard, asking questions about routines. School, emotional adjustment. And how is Emily handling the transition? Angela asked. Claire hesitated. She's quiet. That's common. Older siblings sometimes feel displaced. It's more than that, Claire admitted. She seems scared of him. Angela's pen paused. Scared? Has Noah done something to... No, Claire said quickly. Nothing like that. It's just a feeling. Angela nodded slowly, making a note. I'll keep an eye on it. But remember, Claire, Noah has been through a lot. He may act out in ways that seem confusing. It's important not to project fear onto him. He needs to feel safe here. Claire nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. That night, after everyone was asleep, Emily crept downstairs for a glass of water. She passed Noah's room and stopped. The door was cracked open, just slightly, and through the gap she could see him sitting on the floor. Surrounded by papers, he was drawing something. Emily couldn't see what it was, but she could hear him whispering to himself, over and over. The same words. They won't believe you. They won't believe you. They won't believe you. Emily's hand tightened around the glass, and for the first time in her life she felt truly afraid in her own home. The neighbors noticed things, small things at first, the kind of details that on their own meant nothing, but when you added them all together, they started to form a picture, one that didn't quite match the frame. Margaret Lindell lived 2 houses down. She was 73, a widow, and spent most of her days watching the street from her front porch with a cup of tea and a pair of reading glasses she never actually used for reading. She'd watched the Cross family for years. Watched Emily grow from a toddler into a sweet, quiet girl. Watched, too, Claire garden every Sunday. Watched David work on cars in his driveway. But after Noah arrived, things changed. I don't know how to explain it, Margaret told her friend Judith over the phone one afternoon. It just feels off. Off how? Judith asked. Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. Claire doesn't smile anymore. And the boy, Noah, he sits in the window. Just sits there, staring out, for hours. Maybe he's shy. Shy kids don't stare like that, Margaret said. It's like he's watching, waiting for something. Judith laughed it off. You've been watching too many crime shows, Maggie. But Margaret couldn't shake the feeling. Across town at Ridgewood Elementary, Emily's teacher noticed changes too. Mrs. Callahan had taught first grade for 19 years. She knew when a child was struggling, and Emily Cross, once a bright and eager student, had become a shadow of herself. She stopped raising her hand in class, stopped playing with the other kids at recess. She'd sit alone on the bench, drawing in a notebook she kept clutched to her chest. One day, Mrs. Callahan approached her gently. "Emily, sweetie, is everything okay at home?" Emily looked up, her eyes wide and glassy. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you sure? You seem sad." Emily's grip on the notebook tightened. "I'm fine." Mrs. Callahan crouched down to her level. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything." For a moment it seemed like Emily might say something. Her lips parted. Her breath hitched, but then she shook her head and looked away. "I have to go," she whispered, and walked off before Mrs. Callahan could stop her. Later that week, Mrs. Callahan saw one of Emily's drawings left behind on a desk. It was a picture of a house, a yellow house with white shutters. And in one of the windows, a figure was drawn in black crayon, standing, watching. Underneath, in shaky letters, Emily had written, "He sees everything." Mrs. Callahan folded the drawing carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She told herself she'd bring it up at the next parent-teacher conference. But the conference never happened. At the Ridgewood Community Center, where Claire volunteered twice a week, people started talking. Linda Perkins, the coordinator, pulled Claire aside one afternoon. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. You've seemed a little distant lately." Claire forced a smile. "Just adjusting to the new family dynamic." Linda nodded knowingly. "Adoption can be tough. How's Noah settling in?" "He's doing great," Claire said, a little too quickly. Really great. But Linda had known Claire for 5 years, and she could tell when someone was lying. "And Emily?" Claire's smile faltered. "She's, adjusting." Linda didn't push, but later she mentioned it to another volunteer. "I'm worried about Claire. She doesn't seem like herself." "Maybe the adoption was a mistake," the other volunteer said quietly. "Not every family is built for it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Back on Oak Ridge Lane, David Cross came home from work one evening to find a note taped to his front door. It was handwritten, anonymous. "Some children can't be saved. Be careful." David crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. But that night, as he lay in bed next to Claire, he couldn't stop thinking about it. "Do you ever wonder if we made a mistake?" he asked quietly. Claire didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Every day, outside in the darkness, Noah stood at his bedroom window, watching the street, watching the neighbors, and smiling. Emily didn't like going into the basement. It was cold down there, damp, the kind of place where shadows seemed to move on their own, and every creak of the floorboards above sounded like footsteps following you. But her favorite doll, Lily, with the faded pink dress and missing button, had rolled down the stairs 2 days ago, and Emily wanted her back. So one Saturday afternoon, while Claire was at the grocery store and David was outside mowing the lawn, Emily opened the basement door and descended the wooden steps, one careful foot at a time. The air smelled like old cardboard and dust. She found Lily near the bottom step, lying face down on the concrete floor. Emily picked her up, brushed off the dirt, and was about to head back upstairs when she heard something, a rustling sound, coming from the corner. Emily froze. "Noah?" she called out softly. No answer. She took a step forward, squinting into the dim light. In the far corner of the basement, behind an old workbench and a stack of storage boxes, she saw movement. It was Noah. He was crouched on the floor, his back to her, hunched over something. His shoulders were tense. His hands moved quickly. Deliberately, Emily's heart started to beat faster. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah went still. For a long, terrible moment, he didn't move at all. Then slowly, he turned his head. His face was calm, too calm. "Nothing," he said. "Go away." But Emily didn't. "Go away." She took another step closer, trying to see what he was hiding. Noah stood up quickly, blocking her view. "I said go away, Emily." "What's that?" she asked, pointing past him. Noah's jaw tightened. It's mine. You can't look at it. Why not? Because I said so. Emily felt something twist. In her stomach. Fear, yes, but also something else. Curiosity. The kind that makes you do things even when every instinct tells you not to. She moved to the side, trying to get a better angle, and that's when she saw it. A metal box, old and dented, with a rusty latch, and next to it, spread out on the concrete floor, were papers, dozens of them, drawings, words, some scratched out so hard the paper had torn. Noah lunged forward and grabbed her arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. Don't, he said quietly. Don't tell them. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Tell them, what? Noah stared at her. His eyes were dark, empty. They won't believe you anyway, he said. Then he let go of her arm, bent down, and shoved everything back into the metal box. He closed it with a sharp click and shoved it behind the workbench out of sight. Emily stood there, frozen, clutching. Lily to her chest. Noah walked past her toward the stairs. He paused at the bottom step and looked back. If you say anything, he said softly, I'll tell them you're lying, and they'll believe me. They always believe me. Then he went upstairs. Emily stood alone in the basement, her hands shaking. She didn't understand what she'd just seen. Not fully. But she understood one thing. Noah was hiding something. Something bad. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. The box, the papers, the look in Noah's eyes. They won't believe you anyway. She wanted to tell her mom, wanted to run into her parents' room and say, something's wrong with Noah, something's really wrong. But every time she thought about it, she heard his voice again. They'll believe me. They always believe me. And she knew deep down that he was he. Right. Claire and David had worked so hard to make the adoption work. They smiled when Noah was around, praised him, defended him. If Emily said something now, they'd think she was jealous, or scared for no reason, or making things up. So she said nothing. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep, because somewhere down the hall she could hear Noah's door creak open, and then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps, moving slowly, deliberately, toward her room. Emily's eyes shot open. The footsteps stopped. Right outside her door, she held her breath. The doorknob didn't turn. The door didn't open. But she could feel him there, standing, listening, waiting. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. Back down the hall, back into his room. Emily lay there in the dark, her heart pounding so loud she thought it might wake the whole house. She clutched Lily tighter, and for the first time in her life she understood what it meant to be truly afraid. It happened on a Tuesday night. Claire was in the living room, folding laundry. David had fallen asleep on the couch, the television flickering in the background. Upstairs, the house was quiet, too quiet. At 11:47 p.m., the smoke alarm went off. The sound was piercing, violent. It tore through the silence like a scream. Claire dropped the towel in her hands. "David!" He jolted awake, disoriented. "What?" "Smoke," Claire said, her voice rising. "I smell smoke." They both ran toward the stairs. Black smoke was pouring down from the second floor, thick and choking. Claire covered her mouth with her sleeve and started up the steps, but David grabbed her arm. "Wait," he shouted over the alarm. "We need to—" "The kids are up there." Claire yanked herself free and bolted upstairs. The hallway was filled with smoke she could barely see. Her eyes burned. Her lungs screamed for air. "Emily!" she shouted. "Noah!" She reached Emily's door first and threw it open. Emily was standing in the middle of the room, frozen, her face streaked with tears, coughing. "Come here." Claire grabbed her daughter and pulled her into the hallway. Then she turned toward Noah's room. The door was open, and inside, the flames were already climbing the walls. "Noah!" Claire screamed. She tried to push forward, but the heat was unbearable. The smoke was too thick. David appeared behind her, pulling her back. "Claire, no, he's in there. I'll get him. Go, get Emily out." Claire hesitated for only a second. Then she turned and ran down the stairs with Emily in her arms. Outside, neighbors were already gathering. Someone had called 911. Sirens wailed in the distance. Claire set Emily down on the lawn and turned back toward the house, her chest heaving. David stumbled out a moment later, coughing violently. Alone. "Where's Noah?" Claire's voice cracked. David shook his head, gasping for breath. "I couldn't. The flames. No," Claire whispered. "No, no, no." Firefighters arrived within minutes. They stormed the house with hoses and axes, shouting commands. Claire stood on the lawn, trembling, watching the flames eat away at her home. Emily sat beside her, silent, staring. Her face was blank, empty, like she was somewhere else entirely. 20 minutes later, a firefighter emerged from the house carrying something small, a body covered with a sheet. Claire collapsed. David caught her before she hit the ground, but he couldn't hold himself up either. They sank together onto the grass, sobbing. Emily didn't cry, she just sat there, watching. The firefighters move in and out of the house. One of them approached her gently. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Emily didn't answer. The firefighter crouched down. "Can you tell me what happened?" Emily's lips moved, but no sound came out. "It's okay," the firefighter said softly. "Take your time." Finally, Emily whispered, "I don't know." "Where were you when the fire started?" "In my room." "Did you see anything? Hear anything?" Emily's hands twisted together in her lap. "I heard him." "Heard who?" "Noah." The firefighter's expression shifted. "What did you hear?" Emily looked up at him with wide, glassy eyes. "He was calling for help," she said quietly. "But I couldn't move." Behind them, one of the investigators was speaking into a radio. "Point of origin appears to be the boy's bedroom. But there's something strange here. We found accelerant residue. And a lighter." Another voice crackled through. "Where?" "Near the girls' room." The firefighter in front of Emily stiffened. He looked back at the house, then at Emily. And for the first time that night, someone looked at her not with pity, but with suspicion. The investigation moved quickly, too quickly, some would later say. By Wednesday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the fire, Detective Raymond Cormier stood in the Cross family's driveway with a clipboard and a theory. He was a 20-year veteran of the Ridgewood Police Department, methodical, direct, not one for sentiment. "We need to talk," he said to Claire and David. They sat at a neighbor's kitchen table. Their own home was still a crime scene. Claire's eyes were hollow. David's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Detective Cormier laid a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was a small yellow lighter. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Claire stared at it. "No." It was found in the hallway, just outside Emily's bedroom door. David frowned. "Emily doesn't. She's 6. She wouldn't." "We lifted prints off it," Cormier said, cutting him off. "They belong to your daughter." The room went silent. Claire's breath caught. "That's not possible." "The prints are a match, Mrs. Cross." "Then someone put it there," David said, his voice rising. "Someone planted it. Emily wouldn't." "Mr. Cross," Cormier said evenly. "The fire started in Noah's room, but the accelerant, lighter fluid, was tracked from Emily's room into the hallway. There are small footprints in the residue, child-sized." Claire shook her head slowly, her face pale. "No, you don't understand. Emily loved Noah. She would never—" "Did she?" Cormier asked. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came, because the truth was more complicated than that. Cormier leaned forward. "Mrs. Cross, we've spoken to Emily's teacher, to neighbors. Multiple people have said Emily seemed uncomfortable around Noah, withdrawn. One neighbor even said she seemed frightened." "That doesn't mean she—" David started. We also found evidence that the fire was set intentionally. Cormier continued. This wasn't an accident. Someone poured accelerant and lit it. And right now, all the evidence points to your daughter. Claire's hands covered her face. David stared at the lighter like it might explode. Where is Emily now? Cormier asked. Upstairs, Claire whispered. Sleeping. Cormier stood. I need to speak with her. She's 6 years old, David said, his voice breaking. She just lost her brother. You can't. I can. And I will. They went upstairs. Emily was lying on a borrowed bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't react when they entered. Cormier pulled a chair close and sat down. His voice softened, but only slightly. Emily, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? She didn't respond. Do you know what this is? He held up the evidence bag with the lighter. Emily's eyes flicked toward it, then away. Emily, we found your fingerprints on this lighter. Can you tell me how they got there? Silence. Did you touch this lighter, Emily? Her lips pressed together. Cormier glanced at Claire, who was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Emily, he said more firmly, did you start the fire? Emily's small voice finally broke the silence. I don't remember. Cormier's jaw tightened. You don't remember, or you don't want to say? I don't remember, she repeated, her voice flat. Were you angry at Noah? No. Did he do something that upset you? Emily's hands gripped the blanket. I want my mom. Claire stepped forward, but Cormier held up a hand. Mrs. Cross, please. He turned back to Emily. If you didn't start the fire, Emily, then who did? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Later that evening, after Cormier left, Claire sat alone in the borrowed living room. David was outside, pacing in the driveway on the phone with a lawyer. Claire stared at the evidence bag Cormier had left behind, a photocopy for their records, the lighter, Emily's fingerprints. And then she remembered something. 2 days before the fire, she'd been cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen. Emily had been standing nearby, watching. Claire had tossed an old lighter into the trash. Can I see it? Emily had asked. No, sweetie. It's not a toy. But later, when Claire wasn't looking, had Emily taken it? Claire closed her eyes. She wanted to believe her daughter was innocent, but deep down, a terrible question had started to take root. What if she isn't? By Friday morning, the story had broken. 6-year-old girl suspected in deadly house fire. The headline appeared first on a local news blog. Then it spread. Facebook, Twitter, cable news. By noon, satellite trucks were parked outside the borrowed house where the Cross family was staying. Reporters lined the sidewalk, cameras ready, microphones extended like weapons. Claire peeked through the blinds and felt her stomach turn. They're vultures, David muttered from behind her. He wasn't wrong. On television, pundits debated the case. With disturbing enthusiasm, a child psychologist appeared on a morning talk show. Children as young as 6 absolutely have the cognitive ability to understand cause and effect. If this girl acted out of jealousy or rage, she may have known exactly what she was doing. The host leaned in. But can a child that young truly be held accountable? That's the question, isn't it? The psychologist said gravely. Where do we draw the line between innocence and culpability? In living rooms across the country, people watched, argued, picked sides. Some believed Emily was a victim, a confused child, being scapegoated by an overwhelmed system. Others believed she was dangerous, a warning sign ignored. On social media, the debate turned vicious. She's 6. She doesn't even understand what death means. Old enough to light a match, old enough to face consequences. The parents failed both kids. This is on them. That girl is a monster and everyone's too afraid to say it. The Cross family became a spectacle, their grief dissected, their lives turned inside out. Someone leaked Emily's school photo. It spread like wildfire. A little girl with blonde hair and wide eyes, smiling at the Camera. Underneath, strangers wrote terrible things. Claire stopped looking at her phone. David unplugged the TV, but they couldn't escape it. At the grocery store, people stared, whispered. One woman crossed herself as Claire walked past. At the gas station, a man spat at David's feet. "Your daughter's a killer," he hissed. David said nothing, just walked away. Inside the borrowed house, Emily sat on the floor, coloring. She didn't watch the news, didn't read the comments, but she felt it, the weight of the world pressing down on her small shoulders. One afternoon, a journalist knocked on the door. Claire opened it a crack, her face drawn and exhausted. "Mrs. Cross, I'm Amanda Holder with Channel 7 News. I'd like to ask you a few questions." "No comment," Claire said, and started to close the door. "Wait." Amanda put her hand on the door. "I want to tell your side of the story. Give Emily a voice. She's a child." "Exactly, and the world is making judgments without hearing from her. Let me help." Claire hesitated. For just a moment she considered it. Maybe if people saw Emily, really saw her, they'd understand. They'd see a scared little girl, not a monster, but then, remembered Detective Cormier's words. "All the evidence points to your daughter," and she realized something. No matter what Emily said, no matter how she looked or how she cried, people had already made up their minds. "Leave us alone," Claire said quietly, and she closed the door. That night, a development hit the news. The district attorney's office announced they were moving forward. Emily Cross would be charged. Not as an adult, she was too young for that. But the state would seek a juvenile detention evaluation, psychological assessment, possible long-term custody. The words felt surreal. Claire watched the DA speak on television, her voice steady and cold. "This is not about punishment. This is about safety. We have a responsibility to protect the community, and that includes taking appropriate action when a child demonstrates dangerous behavior." David turned off the TV. Claire sat in silence, and upstairs, Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She didn't understand most of what was happening, but she understood one thing. Everyone thought she did it, even her parents. She could see it in their eyes. The doubt, the fear, the horrible creeping question they were too afraid to ask out loud. "Did you?" The first crack appeared 3 days later. A woman named Sandra Duval walked into the Ridgewood Police Department and asked to speak with Detective Cormier. Sandra was the Cross family's babysitter. She'd worked for them twice a week for the past 6 months. Cormier brought her into an interview room and hit record on the tape deck. "Tell me what you know," he said. Sandra folded her hands on the table. She looked nervous. "I don't think Emily did this." Cormier raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "She was terrified of Noah." "Terrified how?" Sandra chose her words carefully. "He wasn't normal. I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. He'd stare at her, follow her around the house, and when she'd try to get away from him, he'd corner her." "Did you ever see him hurt her?" "No, but I saw her flinch when he got too close. I saw her cry when she thought no one was watching." Cormier leaned back. "Why didn't you report this?" "To who?" Sandra asked. "Claire and David were so invested in making it work. Every time I tried to bring it up, they'd say Noah was adjusting, that he needed patience. They didn't want to hear it." Cormier made a note. "Anything else?" Sandra hesitated. "The night of the fire, Claire called me around 9 p.m., asked if I could come over the next day. She sounded strange. Off. Off how? Like she'd been crying or arguing. I asked if everything was okay, and she said yes. But I didn't believe her." Cormier studied. "Eh?" Her face. "You think something happened that night? Before the fire?" "I don't know," Sandra said quietly, "but I think someone should ask." The second crack came from Emily's teacher. Mrs. Callahan finally came forward with the drawing. The one Emily had made weeks before the fire. The house. The figure in the window. The words, "He sees everything." She handed it to Detective Cormier with shaking hands. "I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry, I didn't think it meant. It's fine, Cormier said, cutting her off. He studied the drawing carefully. Then he asked, Did Emily ever talk about being afraid? Mrs. Callahan nodded. Once. I asked her if everything was okay at home, and she looked at me like she wanted to tell me something, but then she shut down, walked away. Did she mention Noah? Not by name, but she drew him, a lot, always in the background, always, watching. Cormier set the drawing down. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. After she left, he sat alone in his office staring at the evidence. The lighter with Emily's prints, the drawing, Sandra's statement. None of it fit together cleanly. The third crack came from David Cross himself. During a follow-up interview, Cormier asked him to walk through the timeline again. You said you were asleep on the couch when the alarm went off. Is that correct? Yes. And Claire was folding laundry in the living room. Yes. Cormier tapped his pen on the table. What time did you fall asleep? David frowned. I don't know, around 10:30 maybe. And the fire started at 11:47. Right. So you were asleep for over an hour. David nodded slowly. Cormier leaned forward. Mr. Cross, did you or your wife check on the kids before you fell asleep? David opened his mouth, then closed it. Mr. Cross? I don't remember. You don't remember? It was a normal night, David said, his voice rising. I didn't think I needed to. So no one checked on Emily or Noah between 10:30 and 11:47. David's face went pale. Claire might have. I don't know. Cormier made a note. Did you and your wife argue that night? What? No. Are you sure? David hesitated, just for a second. But Cormier saw it. Mr. Cross, if there's something you're not telling me, there's nothing, David said firmly. We didn't argue. But later, when Cormier reviewed the neighbor reports, he found something interesting. Margaret Lindell, the elderly woman who lived 2 houses down, had given a statement. She'd been watching TV that night and heard raised voices around 10 p.m., coming from the Cross house. She couldn't make out the words, but she was certain. It was Claire and David arguing. Cormier sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. The case was starting to look less simple, and Emily Cross was starting to look less guilty. Detective Cormier arrived at the evidence room on Monday morning with a requisition form and a growing sense of unease. He needed to review Noah's belongings, specifically the notebook that had been mentioned in the initial report, the one Emily's teacher said Noah kept with him constantly, the one with the disturbing drawings. The evidence clerk, a tired-looking man named Phil, scanned the form and disappeared into the rows of metal shelving. He came back 5 minutes later, frowning. It's not here. Cormier's jaw tightened. What do you mean it's not here? I mean it's not logged. There's no notebook in the inventory for this case. That's impossible. It was documented at the scene. Phil shrugged. I'm telling you what I see or don't see. Cormier grabbed the inventory sheet and scanned it himself. Fire debris, clothing samples, the lighter, accelerant residue, but no notebook. Who had access to this evidence? Cormier asked. Same as always. Authorized personnel only. Investigators, lab techs, DA's office. I want the access log. Now. Phil printed it out. Cormier ran his finger down the list of names. Most of them were routine, expected, but one entry stood out. 2 days after the fire, someone from the DA's office had signed out the evidence box for review. The name, Assistant DA Monica Brennan. Cormier's blood went cold. Brennan, the same last name as Noah. He pulled out his phone and called his captain. We have a problem. By the afternoon, the situation had escalated. Captain Louise Hargrove sat across from Cormier in her office, her expression grim. You're telling me the ADA removed evidence? I'm telling you the notebook is gone and she had access. Hargrove rubbed her temples. Do you have any idea what you're accusing her of? I'm not accusing, I'm stating facts. Monica Brennan is a decorated prosecutor. She's been with the DA's office for 12 years. She's also related to the victim. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. What? Cormier pulled up the file on his laptop and turned it toward her. Noah Brennan, Monica Brennan. I ran a background check. She's his aunt. Biological mother's sister. Hargrove stared at the screen. She should have recused herself. She didn't, and now a critical piece of evidence is missing. Hargrove stood and paced the room. If this gets out, it's already out, Cormier said. I filed a formal complaint this morning. Hargrove stopped. You did what? I had to. This is a potential conflict of interest. And if that notebook contained something exculpatory, then Emily Cross might be innocent. Hargrove finished quietly. Cormier nodded, and someone didn't want us to know that. By evening, the department was in chaos. Word spread quickly. Investigators whispered in hallways. Some were outraged, others were defensive. Monica's one of the best prosecutors we have, one detective argued. She wouldn't tamper with evidence. Then where's the notebook? Another shot back. The division was palpable. Some believed it was an honest mistake, a clerical error. The notebook would turn up. Others believed something darker was at play. Cormier sat at his desk staring at the case file. He thought about Emily, about the fear in her eyes during the interview, about the way she'd said, I don't remember, not I didn't do it. But I don't remember. Like someone had convinced her she was guilty, like someone had planted that doubt in her mind. His phone rang. It was the public defender, Martin Schaefer. Detective, I just heard about the missing evidence. Is it true? Yes. Schaefer exhaled sharply. We need to halt the proceedings. If that notebook, I'm already working on it. Work faster, Schaefer said. Because that little girl is being railroaded. And if we don't stop this now, she's going to spend the rest of her life paying for something she didn't do. Cormier hung up. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the drawing Mrs. Callahan had given him. He sees everything. He stared at it for a long time. And then he did. Something he rarely did. He prayed he wasn't too late. The break came from an unexpected source. Margaret Lindell, the elderly neighbor who'd reported hearing arguing the night of the fire, called Detective Cormier directly. I think I have something you need to see, she said, her voice trembling. Slightly. Cormier drove to her house within the hour. Margaret led him into her living room, where a small laptop sat open on the coffee table. I have a security camera, she explained. Just a cheap one my son installed last year. Points at my driveway and part of the street. Cormier leaned forward. And? It caught something 3 days before the fire. She clicked play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 6:42 p.m. on a Saturday evening. The camera captured Margaret's driveway and, across the street, a partial view of the Cross family's garage. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Noah appeared. He walked out of the garage, glanced around, and pulled something from his pocket. A yellow lighter. Cormier's breath caught. Noah flicked it once, twice. The small flame appeared, then disappeared. He smiled. Then he slipped it back into his pocket and walked toward the house. There, Margaret said, pausing the video. That's the same lighter, isn't it? Cormier nodded slowly. Yes, it is. So Emily didn't... Maybe not, Cormier said carefully. But there's a problem. He asked Margaret to play it again. This time he watched more closely. The timestamp, the resolution. The way Noah moved. Something felt off. Can I take this? Cormier asked. Of course. Back at the station, Cormier handed the footage to the digital forensics team. I need you to analyze this, frame by frame. The lead analyst, a woman named Karen Delgado, loaded the file and started her examination. An hour later, she called Cormier into the lab. You were right to be suspicious, she said. She pulled up a split-screen comparison. Original footage on the left. Enhanced analysis on the right. See this? She pointed to a section of pixels near Noah's hand. There's a discontinuity. Here, the lighting doesn't match. And the timestamp, look at the metadata. Cormier leaned in. What am I looking at? The file was edited. Someone spliced in footage from a different time. The lighter flick? It's real, but it's not from that day. Can you tell when it's actually from? Karen shook her head. Not precisely, but based on the compression artifacts and the lighting angles, I'd say it was filmed at least a week earlier. Maybe more. Cormier's stomach sank. So someone manipulated this video. Without question. Who? Karen pulled up the file properties. It was transferred from Margaret's camera to this laptop. But before it was copied onto the laptop, it passed through another device. Probably a phone or tablet. That's where the edit happened. Can you trace it? Not from this. But whoever did it knew what they were doing. This wasn't amateur work. Cormier left the lab and sat in his car trying to piece it together. The video showed Noah with the lighter, but the video had been altered, which meant someone wanted him to see it, wanted him to believe Noah had the lighter. But why? To shift blame away from Emily, or to shift it onto Noah posthumously. His phone buzzed. A text from Captain Hargrove. Monica Brennan just lawyered up. We're being stonewalled. Cormier gripped the steering wheel. The case was unraveling. Evidence was missing. Footage was manipulated. The ADA was hiding something. And in the middle of it all was a 6-year-old girl who might be innocent, or might be guilty, or might be something else entirely. A pawn. That night, Cormier sat in his office, staring at 2 pieces of evidence side by side. The lighter with Emily's fingerprints. The edited video of Noah holding the same lighter. One of them was real, one of them was a lie, but which was which? And more importantly, who was controlling the narrative? He opened the case file and found Claire Cross's contact information. He hesitated. Then he dialed. Claire answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was hollow, exhausted. Mrs. Cross, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. A pause. Okay. The night of the fire, you and your husband, you argued. Silence. Mrs. Cross? Her voice came out as a whisper. Yes. What were you arguing about? Another pause, longer this time, and then barely audible. Noah's notebook. Detective Cormier sat forward in his chair. What about the notebook? Claire's breath hitched on the other end of the line. I found it, the day before the fire. Where? In the basement, behind some old boxes. Emily had told me Noah was hiding things, but I didn't believe her. I thought she was just jealous. Acting out. Cormier's pulse quickened. What was in it? Claire's voice cracked. Drawings, horrible drawings of fire, of our house burning, and words, over and over. They won't believe you. They won't believe you. What did you do with it? I showed David. We fought about what to do. He wanted to call the social worker, return Noah to the state. I said we couldn't, that we'd made a commitment. And then, a long, painful silence. I locked it in my car, in the trunk. I was going to decide in the morning. Cormier closed his eyes. Mrs. Cross, where is that notebook now? I don't know. Her voice broke completely. After the fire, I checked the trunk. It was gone. Who else had access to your car? Just David, and... She stopped. And who? Monica Brennan. She came by the day after the fire, said she wanted to help. She was in the driveway for a few minutes, alone. Cormier felt the pieces click into place. Mrs. Cross, why didn't you tell me this before? Claire sobbed. Because I thought, if people knew Noah was disturbed, they'd think Emily had a reason, a motive. I thought I was protecting her. You weren't, Cormier said quietly. You were protecting someone else. He hung up and immediately called Captain Hargrove. We need to bring Monica Brennan in, now. By the next morning, Monica Brennan sat in an interrogation room, her lawyer beside her. Cormier placed the evidence log in front of her. You signed out the evidence box 2 days after the fire. Why? Monica's face remained calm. Routine review. And the notebook? I don't know what you're talking about. Cormier leaned forward. Noah's aunt. You should have recused yourself from this case. Her lawyer interjected. My client has done nothing. Your client tampered with evidence. To protect her nephew's reputation, Cormier snapped. Even after his death, Monica's composure finally cracked. He was 8 years old, a child. I wasn't going to let him be remembered as... As what? Cormier demanded. A disturbed kid who was planning something? A kid who had Emily terrified? Monica's jaw clenched. She's alive, he's not. And she's being blamed for something she didn't do. Monica looked away. Where's the notebook? Cormier asked. She didn't answer. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. Finally, Monica spoke. I burned it. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, advocates, curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. Emily sat at the defense table, her small hands folded in her lap. She looked even smaller than before, fragile, breakable. Claire and David sat behind her, their faces etched with exhaustion and guilt. Judge Feldman entered, and the room rose. Be seated. The prosecution went first. Assistant DA Richard Hollis, brought in to replace Monica Brennan after her removal from the case, stood and addressed the jury with calm precision. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tragedy. A little boy is dead, a family is destroyed, and we must ask ourselves, how did this happen? He paced slowly. The evidence is clear. Emily Cross's fingerprints were on the lighter that started the fire. Accelerant was traced from her bedroom. She had motive, resentment toward her adopted brother, and she had opportunity. He paused, letting the words settle. I understand this is difficult. She's a child, but the law exists to protect us all, and sometimes even children must be held accountable. He sat down. Martin Schaefer, the public defender, stood next. He looked tired, overwhelmed, but determined. Your Honor, members of the jury, this case is not what it seems. He gestured toward Emily. This is a 6-year-old girl. She doesn't understand what's happening here. She's terrified, confused, and she's being used. Hollis started to object, but Schaefer raised his hand. Evidence has been tampered with. A key. Witness, Assistant DA Monica Brennan, destroyed critical material that could have exonerated my client. A video was manipulated to mislead investigators. And through it all, Emily has been painted as a villain when she is, in fact, a victim. He walked closer to the jury. Ask yourselves, does this child look like a murderer? Or does she look like someone who's been silenced? Someone who's too scared to tell the truth because she's been told no one will believe her? Schaefer's voice grew stronger. The real question isn't whether Emily started that fire. The real question is, who made her? Believe she did? The courtroom buzzed. Judge Feldman banged his gavel. Order! Hollis stood again, his expression sharp. Your Honor, the defense is making wild accusations without evidence. Emily Cross has not once denied starting the fire. Not once. She said, and I quote, I don't remember. That's not innocence, that's evasion. Schaefer shot back. Or it's trauma, dissociation. A child's mind protecting itself from something too terrible to process. Or guilt, Hollis countered. The judge raised his hand. Enough. We'll hear testimony. Witnesses were called. Sandra, the babysitter, testified about Noah's behavior, about Emily's fear. Mrs. Callahan presented the drawing, explained Emily's withdrawal. Detective Cormier took the stand and detailed the missing notebook, the edited video, Monica Brennan's interference. But Hollis was relentless. Detective, did you find any evidence, any at all, that someone other than Emily Cross started that fire? Cormier hesitated. No direct evidence, but yes or no, detective? No. Thank you. The jury looked uncertain. Then Hollis called his final witness, David Cross. David walked to the stand, pale and shaking. Hollis asked him point blank, Mr. Cross, do you believe your daughter started the fire? David's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Emily. She stared back at him, her eyes pleading. His voice broke. I don't know. The courtroom fell silent, and in that moment, Emily's face changed. The fear disappeared, replaced by something else. Resolve. She stood up. Stop. Every head in the courtroom turned toward Emily. Judge Feldman leaned forward. Young lady, sit down. But Emily didn't sit. Her small voice rang out clear and steady for the first time since this all began. I have proof. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The jury shifted in their seats. Judge Feldman banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! Martin Schaefer stood quickly, caught off guard. Your Honor, She said she has proof, the judge interrupted, his eyes locked on Emily. I want to hear, it. Emily reached into the pocket of her dress, the same oversized dress she'd worn since the first day, and pulled something out. A piece of fabric, burned at the edges, charred, but still intact enough to see faint markings. Red ink, smudged but visible. She held it up with trembling hands. This was in Noah's notebook, she said quietly. The one they said was gone. The courtroom went silent. Detective Cormier stood from his seat in the gallery. Your Honor, may I approach? Judge Feldman nodded. Cormier walked to Emily and crouched down beside her. Where did you get this? Noah gave it. To me, Emily said. The night before the fire, he said someone was going to take his notebook. He said they'd make it disappear. So he tore this page out and told me to hide it. Why didn't you tell anyone? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because he said if I did, they wouldn't believe me. He said they'd think I was lying. He said they always believe the grown-ups. Cormier took the fabric carefully, holding it up to the light. On it, in childish handwriting, were words. She's going to hurt me. She said I'm a mistake. She said I ruin everything. And below that, a drawing, a woman's face, rough, angry, and beneath the drawing, a name. Aunt Monica. The courtroom exploded. Judge Feldman slammed his gavel repeatedly. Quiet. I will clear this room. Hollis was on his feet. Your Honor, this is... Sit down, Mr. Hollis, the judge said sharply. Cormier stood and turned toward the gallery. His eyes found Claire Cross. She was frozen, staring, not at Emily, at the fabric. Mrs. Cross, Cormier said slowly, did you know about this? Claire's face crumpled. I saw Monica with Noah once, a week before the fire. They were in the garage. She was yelling at him. I asked her what was wrong, and she said he was being difficult. I didn't think, her voice broke. I didn't think she'd... Judge Feldman turned to his bailiff. Bring Monica Brennan back into this courtroom, now. Within minutes, Monica was escorted in, her lawyer protesting loudly. She saw the fabric in Cormier's hand, and her face went white. You knew, Cormier said, his voice cold. You knew Noah was afraid of you. You knew what you'd said to him, and when he died, you destroyed the evidence to protect yourself. Monica's lawyer stepped forward. My client will not... Your client, Judge O. Feldman said, his voice like steel. We'll answer the question. Ms. Brennan, did you threaten Noah Brennan in the days before his death? Monica's jaw clenched. Silence. Ms. Brennan, he wasn't supposed to be there, she said suddenly, her voice sharp, defensive. He was my sister's mistake. I told them not to take him. I told them he'd ruin their lives, and I was right. The courtroom was deathly silent. I didn't start the fire, Monica continued, her voice rising. But I'm not going to let a dead boy destroy my career. I did what I had to do. Judge Feldman stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Emily. Did Noah tell you who started the fire? Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. But he knew someone was going to blame me, she whispered. He told me to keep the paper safe. He said one day, people would need to see it. Monica Brennan's face twisted. For a moment she looked like she might speak, defend herself, explain. But then something shifted in her expression. Her breath quickened. Her hand went to her chest. I can't. Her knees buckled. The bailiff lunged forward and caught her before she hit the floor. Get a medic! Someone shouted. The courtroom descended into chaos. People stood. Cameras flashed. Judge Feldman banged his gavel uselessly as paramedics rushed in. Monica was lowered onto a stretcher, her face pale and slick with sweat. Her lawyer hovered nearby, barking orders, but Monica wasn't responding. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. But she wasn't seeing anything. She was gone, mentally, emotionally, collapsed under the weight of her own lies. Within minutes, she was wheeled out of the courtroom. Judge Feldman stood, his face grave. This trial is suspended pending further investigation. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down one final time, but no one moved. The room was frozen in stunned silence. Emily sat at the defense table, clutching the piece of fabric in her small hands. Claire crossed the barrier and pulled her daughter into her arms, sobbing. David stood behind them, his face buried in his hands. Outside the courthouse, the scene was mayhem. Reporters swarmed. Microphones were shoved toward anyone who would speak. Is Emily Cross innocent? Was Monica Brennan involved in the fire? Will charges be dropped? Detective Cormier stood on the courthouse steps, refusing to answer questions. But inside, he knew the truth. The case was falling apart. Monica had destroyed evidence, tampered with the investigation. But there was still no definitive proof of who started the fire. Noah was dead. Emily's fingerprints were still on the lighter. And the edited video, while suspicious, didn't prove innocence. It only proved manipulation. The district attorney's office released a statement that evening. In light of recent developments, we are reviewing all evidence in the case of Emily Cross. No further comment at this time. It was carefully worded, non-committal. A legal retreat. Public opinion, however, had already shifted. Social media exploded. Free Emily trended nationwide. People who had called her a monster now called her a victim. Op-eds were written, think pieces published. Everyone had an opinion. But the one person who mattered, Emily, said nothing. She sat in the borrowed house with her parents, staring out the window. Claire tried to talk to her. Sweetheart, it's going to be okay now. They know you didn't. I don't remember, Emily said softly. Claire froze. What? Emily turned to look at her. I don't remember what happened that night. Mom, I remember being in my room. I remember smoke, I remember Noah screaming, but I don't remember how it started. Emily, what if I did do it? Her voice was small, broken. What if I just don't remember? Claire's heart shattered, because even now, after everything, Emily had been conditioned to doubt herself, to believe the lie. 3 days later, the district attorney's office made their final decision. All charges against Emily Cross were dropped. Insufficient evidence, compromised investigation, the case was closed. But justice was nowhere to be found. Monica Brennan was placed on administrative leave. She faced potential charges for evidence tampering, but no criminal trial was ever scheduled. She resigned quietly, disappeared from public life. And the question everyone wanted answered, who really started the fire, remained unanswered. Noah was gone. The notebook was destroyed, and Emily's memory was a blank. The truth had been buried under so many lies that no one could dig it out anymore. 6 weeks later, Emily Cross sat in the living room of her Aunt Rachel's house, 3 states away from Ridgewood. The house smelled like lavender and old books. It was quiet, safe. Rachel was Claire's younger sister. She'd agreed to take Emily in while Claire and David sorted things out. That's what they called it, sorting things out. But Emily knew the truth. Her parents couldn't look at her anymore, not with anger, not with blame, with something worse, guilt. Rachel was kind. She made pancakes on Sundays, let Emily stay up late reading, never asked questions she didn't want to answer. But Emily knew she couldn't stay here forever. One afternoon, a man came to the house. He had a camera, a microphone, a gentle smile. Hi, Emily. My name's Jason. I make documentaries. I wanted to ask you a few questions. Just to hear your side of things, is that okay? Rachel stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She doesn't have to do this. I know, Jason said, but I think people need to hear from her. Emily looked at Rachel, then at Jason. Okay, she said. Quietly. They sat on the porch. Jason set up his camera, asked her easy questions at first. Her favorite color, her favorite animal, what she liked to read. Then, slowly, he moved closer to the truth. Do you remember the night of the fire? Emily stared at her hands. Some of it. What do you remember? I remember being scared. I remember hearing Noah yell. I remember my mom pulling me outside. Do you remember starting the fire? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. No. Do you think you did? She looked up at him, her eyes red and tired. I don't know. Jason leaned forward. Emily, a lot of people think you were blamed for something you didn't do. Do you believe that? Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think grown-ups decide what's true, and kids just have to live with it. Jason's face softened. Do you think justice was done? Emily looked directly into the camera, and for the first time her expression was unreadable. Not scared, not sad, just empty. Justice? She repeated. She thought about Noah, about his notebook, about the way he used to watch her. She thought about Monica, about her mother's silence, about her father's doubt. She thought about the courtroom, the reporters, the strangers who called her a monster. And then she thought about the piece of fabric she'd pulled from her pocket, the one Noah had given her, the one that had saved her, but also the one that had left so many questions unanswered. I don't think justice is real, Emily said quietly. I think it's just a word people use when they want to feel better. Jason didn't respond. He just let the camera roll. After a moment, Emily stood and walked back into the house. The interview was over. Jason packed up his equipment, thanked Rachel, and left. The documentary aired 3 months later. It was called The Girl Who Remembered Nothing. Millions of people watched it. Some cried for Emily. Some still believed she was guilty. Some said the system had failed her. Others said it had protected her. But no one knew the truth. Not really. Because the truth had burned in that fire, along with Noah. And all that was left were the stories people told themselves to make sense of it. Emily never watched the documentary. She didn't need to. She was living it. Years later, someone would ask her again, "Do you think justice was done?" And Emily would give the same answer, a long, quiet look, and then she'd turn away. Because some questions don't have answers, and some wounds never heal. They just become part of who you are. The screen fades to black. A final title card appears. The truth, in court, is only what can be proven. And sometimes the most important proof disappears.